All right, so let's start with the risers. I'm going to open up an instance of Faceplant. I'm going to assume in this video that you have a basic understanding of patching in Faceplant. If you don't worry, I've got you covered. I have a tutorial teaching you how to make bird sounds that pretty much covers the basics. All right, so I'm going to open a sampler. So the first thing I did is I've added a shortcut to the folder in order to be able to just load those samples on the fly instead of having to like switch between Soundly and Cubase all the time, kind of a, pain in the ass. So let's load, I don't know, this sample. So what's cool about a sampler is that it's easy to really quickly try out what a sample sounds like at different pitches just by playing a different note, different octaves, or by just messing with the pitch here. I really like -3. I think it's sounding fat and beefy. All right, so first, I like to make an envelope to kind of delimitate sounds in time because it's easier for my brain to process sound this way. So an envelope, so we know that first riser needs to be around 2.4 seconds and that second riser needs to be around 2 seconds. So using the same patch, we can probably make risers that could be used for both. All right, so I'm gonna add a whole second of hold time and then 1.4 second of attack time, and then drop the volume, and then full blast. Maybe we can just like drop the sustain and add a little decay just in case. All right. Cool. So we want to make a riser, so we want some form of upwards movement, right? So the easiest way to do so is just to modulate the pitch. So I'm going to instantiate an LFO, set it to one-shot mode, 1 divided by 2.4, 0.42, let's say 0.41. So 0.41, and then we can edit that LFO, have that kind of curve, and assign it to the pitch. Not much. Usually between 5 and 12-ish semitones, you can get a good riser. Maybe some curve like this. Even less than that. Maybe like, I don't know, 5 semitones. All right, I think it's cool. So we don't want to only modulate the pitch. We also want to modulate other parameters of the sound to build up the tension. So the easiest way to do so is to add some distortion, and I'm gonna set it to 0, but then I'm gonna use that same LFO to drive the distortion. Maybe we can filter the sound a bit. I don't know, like have a bit less highs at first and then introduce them during the riser. It's a bit intense, but all right, maybe before the distortion. Maybe we can have, I don't know, another filter, this time a peak, sweeping up maybe. Let's try that. Okay, I kind of like that. It may be a bit intense, but... And we have our first riser, so let's print it to audio. When I do sound design, I always print to audio very early in the process. I have a whole video just on that concept Go check it out. So I'm gonna rename that track, print faceplant riser. I'm gonna arm the recording. All the routing is already done for me to be able to just like hit record. And ta-da, I have it as an audio file. So then I can just keep tweaking that patch. And maybe one thing we can try is add some unison. So basically, the sampler will play additional versions of the sample, but with slightly different pitches or playback rates. This produces a sound that's fatter and slightly phasey flangy because of chorusing caused by the pitch and phase differences. If the blend knob is at 0, you only hear the original sample. And this allows us to blend the copies. So maybe we can automate that with the LFO. I kind of like it. It gets kind of like fatter and more tonal towards the end. All right. You have to be careful with unison on a sample though, because unlike an oscillator where basically copies of the signal kind of catch up with themselves, like it's the same waveform being looped on itself, the sampler detunes by slowing down or speeding up the copies of the signal. In the case of that kind of sample that's very stable and that's kind of a static, it's fine because it's the same harmonic content. But if you have a sample that moves more and has more differences from one moment to the next, all your copies will just basically get desynced. I can show you that really easily. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Load that in here. Okay, I'm gonna loop that section. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, if I up the gain and add unison. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let me crank it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. So it's not a unison anymore. It's just basically kind of a weird delay. Honestly, you can modulate any effect to kind of reinforce the riser. Like, I don't know, some comb filtering. Or, I don't know, phaser, flanger. Like, if you pull down the depth to 0 and the motion to 0, you have a static flanger, which is basically just a delay. And then you can modulate the delay parameter to move the quote-unquote pitch of the comb filtering. Same with the phaser, you just modulate the cutoff. And then if you really want to go nuts, you can, I don't know, disable the pitch modulation on the sample, which is just like slowing down or accelerating the sample, and pull up, let me clean that, pull up, I don't know, pitch shifter. You get a weird kind of granular pitch shifting, which can be interesting. It's a bit more lo-fi than shifting the playback pitch of the sample. Maybe if you don't correlate. Maybe a frequency shifter if you really want to go crazy. You can also go down in pitch if you want what the kids call a downlifter. Like you can have something that goes up in energy and urgency, but goes down in pitch if that's what the movement of your design needs. It doesn't have to go up in pitch, it can go down. For this design and with these sources, I'll stick to a very simple patch because those are already very kind of like rich sources in terms of like spectrum and character. But anyway, I just wanted to show that you can do whatever you want. And the more you modulate parameters and the more kind of alive and dynamic the sound will be. One trick that I really like too, like, let me choose another sample that has a bit more stuff happening. Maybe this one. And actually, let me shorten it so I have more control. So I can loop that section here. Okay, let me... And okay, a bit more crossfade and... So there's a slight acceleration in the loop because we're playing the sample faster, but you can exaggerate it with the envelope. Maybe I want a different envelope on this one. Envelope, I'm LFO. You kind of exaggerate the feeling of urgency of the riser by having something happen faster and faster as you move on. You can have a similar effect if you... Let me go back to that first sample. If you like take an... Oops. If you like take an LFO and, I don't know, maybe a sine wave, and you modulate the gain. Okay, let me make it faster. And then if you take that LFO and modulate the rate of that other LFO, you get an acceleration in the tremolo. Maybe a bit of distortion. It can get you the cool effect of something that's like spinning faster and faster. But I'll spend more time on amplitude modulation a bit later in this video. Now that we have this basic patch setup, we can just try different samples with it. Maybe this one. Yeah, I kind of like that. There's some kind of intensity going on here. And then we can maybe try a different pitch. Yeah, I like this one. And let's try another sample. Yeah, it's kind of like a bee, kind of like a, I don't know, a mosquito or something. So this one has a lot of accident. It's a very unstable sample. Oof, I kind of like that. I kind of like that. Doo-ba-doo-ba-doo. Yes,